Hello, everyone. This is Miss Lopez, and this is day 3 of our notes. So today we're going to be going over the midpoint. We already found out how to measure a distance. Let's look at the first one. It says the midpoint of EF. We know how to measure E to F, right? We go from E to F. E is at 2, F is at 6. Make sure that they're not counting. These little dashes could be actually counting by like 2s or 5s, but it looks like they're counting by 1s in this case. So we can count from E to F. We know that that is 1, 2, 3, 4 units. And we know our halfway in between there is going to be right here, right? And this is going to be at point 4. So the way we can figure out the method we're going to use to figure this out is the midpoint formula, okay? So we're going to add them up and divide by 2. E is at 2, plus we're going to add them up. F is at 6, and then divide that by 2. 6 plus 2 is 8, divided by 2 is 4. So that'll give us our coordinate for the midpoint, which is what we got. So we need to know the actual formula because we're not going to always be given a number line. It could be on a coordinate grid, and we'll be using different things. So example 1 says, what is the midpoint of DF, right? And this is a really good case. D, I'm going to circle in blue. D is right here at -1, and F is still at +6, right? So I'm going to use my formula. I'm going to say -1 plus 6 divided by 2. Now, if this is a little bit difficult for you, I want you guys to follow along, use your calculators. -1 plus 6 is the same thing as 6 minus 1, which is 5. Divided by 2. 5 divided by 2 is 2.5. So this is equal to 2.5. And I think on the test, it'd be really nice for you guys to actually graph it. We give a graph paper, try it out. I'm going to make sure you guys get some graph paper or a little grid on it and try it out and make sure that makes sense. I'm going to write in 2.5, and I want to make sure this makes sense. So I have, like I said, D is at -1, and F is at 6. Does this point right here in the middle, 2.5, does that look like it's halfway in between D and F? To me, yes, it does also. Good. Find the coordinate of the midpoint of the segment with endpoints 2 and -5. So remember, we're just going to add them up and divide by 2. So I have 2 and -5. It doesn't matter which ones you put first. Since we're adding them, it doesn't matter. You can put 2 first or -5 first. So if I put 2 plus -5, right, divided by 2, that's the same thing if I put -5 plus 2 divided by 2, okay? -5 plus 2 is -3. 5 is bigger, so it's still negative. Divided by 2 is -1.5, or just leave it as -3/2. I'm okay with that. -5 plus 2 is -3, right? Divided by 2, which is the same thing, -1/2. -1/2, 1.5. Okay. You can plot that. We don't really have a -5 on this line, so maybe try it on a different line and see how that works. Line target number 5 is I can find the coordinates of an endpoint, okay, given an endpoint and a midpoint. So this is a little bit different. I don't think any of you have seen this before, unless you've already taken geometry. It says if we know one endpoint, okay, one endpoint, write an end right here, right? One endpoint and the midpoint, we can find the other endpoint. So let's try it out. We're given C. We need to find D, but I know that the point directly in between them, the midpoint is 3, right? C is at -1, the midpoint is 3, D is what? Okay, so I know that since M is directly in the middle, the distance from 1 to 3, if we had little dashes, we could actually count over. I know that -1 to 3 is 4 units. So if I had gone over, this is -1, 0, 1, 2, and then 3, I'm going to go over 1, 2, 3, 4 units. Then I know I have to go over another 4 units to get to D. So I'm going to go over, I can go over another 4 units, 1, 2, 3, and then D will be the fourth one. So 1, let me get a different color. 1, 2, 3, 4 units, okay? So 3, 4, 5, 6, D will be at 7. Now, sometimes this can get pretty complicated, especially if you have decimals in there. We're not going to always be able to graph it. So what I want you guys to do is remember double, double, subtract. Double, double, subtract. And then we'll write subtract. Okay, now what we're going to do, we're always going to start with the midpoint. So we're going to start with the one that they give us that's directly in the middle, which in our case, our midpoint is M is at 3, right? So we're going to take 3, we're going to double it, so that means multiply it by 2, and then we're going to subtract the endpoint that they give us. Our endpoint that they give us is C, which is -1. 3 times 2 is 6, minus a negative. You need to put that in your calculator. You need to know that that is a plus, and then 1. 6 plus 1 is 7. Okay, so that gives us our 7 also. So that's a different way we can figure that out. This is the way we're going to use, especially when we have an ordered pair, an x and a y value. Okay, so remember, to find an endpoint, we're going to use double, double, subtract. If a segment has one endpoint at 12, so 12 is our endpoint, and the midpoint at 7, I'm always going to box in midpoint because the midpoint is the one that's most important to me. That's the one I need to start with. Find the other endpoint. Okay, this is definitely going to be a couple of questions like this on your quiz and your test. So I have to start with the midpoint. I can't start with the endpoint, guys. I have to start with the midpoint. I'm going to start with 7. I'm going to multiply it by 2, and then I'm going to subtract the end point, which is 12. So the only thing that is not changing is this 2 right here. I always have to multiply it by 2. That's what double means. Double means you're going to multiply it by 2. 7 times 2 is 14. So we have 14 minus 12, right? 14 minus 12 is 2. So 2 is our other endpoint. Write it in there. A line segment or ray that intersects a segment at its midpoint is a segment bisector. So it's explaining segment bisector to you. I'm going to try to teach you when we come back to class. We're going to go over a construction. We're going to learn what a segment bisector is on a construction, and then later in the year we'll learn how to do this on the computer. So the intersection does not have to be a right angle. And this is what I'm going to show you. Draw a segment being bisected. So the word segment means that I have a beginning and I have an end, right? So this is a line segment, and I'm being bisected. The word bisected means to be cut in half. I need you guys to write this in. Cut in half equally. Write the equal sign. So we're going to cut my red line segment in half equally 3 times. Once is going to be by a line. The line is going to be green. You have to cut the line segment in half equally. So maybe right here is the midpoint, right? But it doesn't have to go. It doesn't have to be at a right angle. So it doesn't have to go straight up and down. It could kind of go at a slant. Ooh, I tried to get through that dot. Okay, it's going to go it can be at a slant. As long as they say it's a line, remember we need to put a line with 2 arrows. So I have an arrow on top and then an arrow on the bottom, okay? A segment is a line with 2 endpoints. It's a line segment. segment is the same as line segment. So right in there, line segment. I don't usually use the word segment by itself. I only like line segment. So I'm going to draw the line segment in blue. My line segment, we already have a red line segment. We're going to bisect it. I'm going to try to get it to go through this dot. And it can be straight up and down, but not necessarily. And it's going to be another line segment, okay? Array. Remember, array has a beginning and endpoint, but it goes on infinitely in one direction without end, okay? Array, this is a symbol for array. And so we're also going to cut it in half equally. Let's use black. So I'm going to cut this red segment in half equally with array. Okay. Now, it doesn't matter which side has my arrow or which side has my endpoint in this case, as long as you have one side that has an arrow, okay? Only one arrow, the other one has to have a dot, or just leave it alone. Alrighty, go ahead and flip your page over. Draw a segment that is bisected. So I want you to underline that word, that new word bisected, and write cut in half equally. Creating a right angle. Remember a right angle, it looks something like this when two lines intersect. Pretend like these are lines, okay? Let's put some arrows on them. When they intersect and they meet at a 90-degree angle or a right angle, that's that 90 degrees right here. So under right angle or above right angle, I want you to put 90 degrees, okay? 90 and then that little degree symbol up there. Perpendicular means that they meet at a 90-degree angle. So that's what this is. Bisector means that they are cut in half. Equally, right? All right, I want you guys to try this one out. Draw this. All right, example 4, RS. What is RS on top? Do you guys see that this is a line RS? Line RS is a bisector of this on top does not have any arrows. So this is a line segment AB. You may not bisect a line. A line is infinite, so we can't bisect infinite. However, and you cannot bisect a ray because that one side is infinite, right? So the ray itself is infinite. However, you can bisect a line segment. So right on top of bisector, write line segment. Because AB is a line segment, which is perfect. So A to M is 2x plus 5. So this part of my line segment is 2x plus 5. And the other side of my line segment, MB, is 5x minus 7. So M to B is 5x minus 7. What is the length of AB, of the line segment AB? So what is the whole thing, right? They want the whole thing. Another word for length is distance. Under the word length, write distance. So on the SOL, they love to interchange those words. What is the length of AB? What is the distance between AB? So get used to that length and distance being the same thing. So if we see this word bisector and we're using, if this segment is bisected, then we know that the green one and the red one are equal to each other, right? It's cut in half equally. That means that these segments are equal. So that means that I can set them equal. So I'm going to write out 2x plus 5 is equal to 5x minus 7. And now we have x's on both sides of that equality sign. So this is why we went over this in the algebra review. I'm going to move my 2x, my x's to the right, and then my numbers to the left, just because I want my x's to be positive. If you want to do the opposite, that's fine. So I'm going to subtract my 2x to move it to the right, okay? And so I'm going to be left with 5 is equal to 5 minus 2 is 3x. And then I still have a minus 7, bring that down. Now I'm going to move my 7 to the left. And in order to do that, since it's negative, I'm going to write down plus 7, plus 7. 5 plus 7 is 12. Usually you guys help me out with this. And so I have 12 equals 3x. What I'm going to do is I'm going to divide by the coefficient. We never divide by x. But the number in front of the x is 3. So I'm going to divide by 3. And 12 divided by 3 is 4. Okay? So am I done? Is that what they asked us? No. It wasn't that easy, right? It says, what is the length of AB? I don't know. But now I know what x is. X is 4. That'll help me out a lot, right? Now I can plug it in. So I have 2. I'm going to write it down. 2 times 4, x is 4, plus 5, right? 2 times 4 is 8, plus 5 is 13, right? 13, I don't even have to plug it into this side. You can if you want, but you need to get 13, right? 5 times 4 is 20, minus 7 is nice, 13, good, perfect. My headphones keep turning off. They just turned off right now. I'm gonna turn them back on. So A to M is 13, M to B is 13. We want the whole thing A to B, but we have to add them up. 13 plus 13 is 26. So that means that A to B is 26. So that is our answer, 26. Okay. Let's go to the next one. On the coordinate plane now, each point has 2 coordinates. I don't know. 2? Okay. Find the midpoint of JK. Midpoint of JK. Let's try it out. I'm going to plot these 2 points first. J is at -2, 7. Remember that we have an x value comes first, y value comes next. It's always alphabetical order, okay? This is my x-axis, and this is my y-axis. That's why there's a y up there. So I'm going to go -2, +7. So I'm going to go to the right, to the left 2, and then up 7. So this is J right here. And then K is going to be blue, and this is going to be +2, -1, it says. So I'm going to go to the right 2, and then down 1. And to find the midpoint in between them, it looks a little bit difficult, right? Since we're going like to the right and down. So I am going to use the formula that we made. And I'm going to write it down here in the midpoint formula. The midpoint formula is x plus x divided by 2, okay, comma, y plus y divided by 2. This is the most important formula for today, so please make sure you write this really nice, and I want you to put a star by it. Everything that has a star by it, I want you to go and review before you take your test or your quiz, okay? Now, find the midpoint of JK. We're going to first write down our x's. Help me out, guys. I know that J's x is -2, and K's x is +2, right? So I'm going to plug it into this formula. We're going to add up our x's, divide by 2. So I have -2 plus 2 divided by 2, comma. Now I'm going to do the y's. We have 7 plus, this y value is -1 divided by 2. Now I've just plugged this into your calculator, but -2 plus 2 is 0. 0 divided by 2 is still 0, right? That's okay though. It's not undefined or anything. 7 plus -1 is the same thing as 7 minus 1. 7 minus 1 is 6. So I can rewrite this for you, 6 over 2, right? And then you guys can help me out. 6 over 2 is what? We know that 6 over 2 is 3. So write down 3. Alrighty. So we use the midpoint formula. I'm going to do a couple of these for you, and then I want you to try these out, okay? So remember, we're going to start with the x values. I want you to start with 13 and start with -6. So I'm going to plug those in first. 13 plus -6 divided by 2. And then put a comma. And then let's do the y values, 8 and -6. 8 plus -6, and then divide that by 2. Use your handy dandy calculator. 13 plus -6 is the same thing as 13 minus 6, which is 7 divided by 2. Since it's a fraction, since it's a decimal, I would just leave it like that. 7 over 2. 7 divided by 2, comma. 8 minus 6 is 2 divided by 2. Anything divided by itself is 1, right? So that's it. Ta-da. I will help you with C. Since there is a decimal, I'm going to help you go over this, okay? And then let's do a question that's very similar to this with the decimal. Alrighty. So I'm still going to pick out my x values, which are my first two. And I'm going, it doesn't matter which one you start with. I'm going to start with the first one. So I have -6.3 plus 1.8. Divide that by 2, comma. Now I'm going to start with my y values, which is 5.2 and -1. So 5.2 plus -1. Divide that by 2. Okay? So -6.3 plus 1.8 is -4.5. And then you're going to divide that by 2, which is, okay, well, I'll put it down here, -2.25, right? And then we have 5.2 minus 1. That's pretty easy. That's just 4.2. So I'm going to write 4.2 divided by 2 is equal to 2.1. So that is your answer for the midpoint for C. That one was looks a little tricky because you have some decimals. For segment, this is our last one. For segment ST, given that T is at 0, 4, and we're given the midpoint. Remember, we're going to box midpoint. That's the most important thing. Find the coordinate of S. How do I know that S is an endpoint? Because we're given that the segment is ST. Remember, for the segment, we're always going to use the endpoints. We have S and we have T. The midpoint of ST is right here. This is my midpoint, and this is -5, 8. S is something we don't know, but T is at 0, 4. So remember, we're going to start with the midpoint. We're going to start with the midpoint. I'm going to write it down, -5 and 8. We're going to double them. We're going to multiply them by 2. So -5 times 2, maybe we can just write down like something like this, right? And then 8 times 2. -5 times 2 is 10, -10, and 8 times 2 is 16. And then we're going to subtract the endpoint. So I'm going to subtract 0 from the 10, which is nothing. Subtract 4 from the 16. -10 minus 0 is just still -10, right? So we still have -10, comma. 16 minus 4 is 12. Alrighty, and that is our point. So this one has to be at -10, and this one has to be at 12. And that is your answer for the coordinate of S. Coordinate means we're going to have an x and a y value. Alrighty, guys. I hope you guys had a great time, and I will see you in class.